Quoting the headlines today, exactly 100 years ago, on September 20th, 1924, the Illustrated London News published an article containing explosive news, which has reverberated down the decades and continues to cast a long shadow in South Asia even a century later. Indeed, something the archaeology world still rejoices. So on this occasion of 100th anniversary of announcement of discovery of Harappan civilization, we would like to begin this event, remember this momentous occasion, and invite Professor Ajit Prasad, Dr. Dennis, and Dr. Prabhakar to light the lamp. I would like to invite upon the stage Dr. Prabhakar to sing. And I would request Professor Jeet Prasad and Dr. Dennis to come upon the stage. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. It's a momentous occasion. It was exactly 100 years before John Marshall of the Archaeological Survey of India announced the discovery of the Indus civilization. At the time, it was called like Indus civilization. There are various terms for that: Indus civilization, Indus Valley civilization, Harappan civilization, Harappan culture. There are various names. During the course of 100 years of journey, we have witnessed several researches taken in this field. But first and foremost, I welcome all of you here, and also all the online participants who have taken the time to join this very important occasion. And to begin with, what I would suggest is that we will take some messages from senior archaeologists and scholars who have done tremendous work in the field of Harappan archaeology. And first and foremost, I would request Dr. R.S. Bisht, who has joined us online, to deliver his message.
So I welcome all of you. Dennis.
Yeah, Dennis is here. Yeah.
Ajit Prasad.
Yeah.
Ajit Prasad.
Yeah, he's here. He's here.
And yourself, Dr. Prabhakar. I welcome. Yeah, it is always a great pleasure to speak about the Harappan civilization, which I have lived. Today is a very historic day in the sense that the first article on the findings of Harappan and Mohenjo-daro were written by Sir John Marshall. And that was published in the Illustrated London News of 20th September, as you know, all of you. It was really a historic day. Historic day in the sense that turning point came in 1921 when first Dayaram Sahni excavated Harappa. And second turning point was when Dayaram Sahni, when Rakhal Das Banerjee noticed that the similar material what was being found at Harappa was coming up at Mohenjo-daro also. And now this 20th century, 20th September is a very historic day in the sense that Sir John Marshall, who was the Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, under whose direction both the sites were being excavated, uh, sent that paper to the Illustrated London News, and it was published on 20th September 1920, 1924. And most importantly, a week later, in the next issue, it was a weekly, in the very next issue, Sese said that the similar material is being found at the Mesopotamian Sumerian sites also. And further, next to that, on the 4th October, C.J. Gadd and Smith further supported the views of Gadd that such material, particularly seals with that typical writing, was being found at the Sumerian sites also. Before that, it was not known that chronologically where the Harappan civilization or Indus Valley civilization should be placed. That was the time when a time frame was given to the Harappan civilization, and that time frame was around the Sargon of Akkad. His date was very early at that point of time. So the first date that was given to Harappan civilization was 3250 to 2700 BC or so. But subsequently, when the chronology of Mesopotamia was revised and further revised and re-revised, then Sir Mortimer Wheeler placed it between 2500 BCE and 1500 BCE. And shortly thereafter, the radiocarbon dating method, the scientific dating method came. And first, D.P. Agrawal suggested a very shorter chronology of 2300 BCE and 1750 BCE. But later on, many calibration charts were appeared, and now it is believed that definitely. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we are hearing.
Mute हो गया क्या?
We are hearing you, sir.
हाँ, अच्छा, okay. The radiocarbon dates were recalibrated, and now the time frame is given is 2500 to 2000. Some push it back to 2600 BCE and take it down to 1900 BCE. There's a time period given to the Harappan civilization. So that's why we can understand the historic importance of today, of this day, 100 years ago. Should I speak more or that's enough?
Sir, we can take more views later on. Now we have some more guests, so I would request them to deliver their message. So we have Randall Law with us.
Okay. Greetings from Madison, Wisconsin, and hello to my friends and colleagues at IIT Gandhinagar, as well as all of those joining us remotely. I was honored to have been asked to speak at this very special event commemorating the 100th anniversary of the announcement of the discovery of the Harappan civilization. However, I have to keep my remarks brief as it is the start of the workday here in Madison, and I am required to be elsewhere in only a matter of a few minutes. Let me start by saying I've had the privilege to conduct research in South Asia for 25 years now, real full quarter century. During this time, I've had two primary aims. First is the material characterization of this full suite of stone and metal objects used by ancient Harappan peoples. The second, and in many ways most interesting aim, has been attempting to discover the geologic sources of the raw stone and metal artifacts that Harappans utilized to make those items, and in doing so, to reconstruct their ancient trade and communication networks. This latter research goal has taken me across the Indian subcontinent through its hills and ranges, diverse geologic formations, and into both ancient and modern mining areas, all for the purpose of collecting samples with which I could compare to ancient stone and metal artifacts recovered from excavated Harappan sites. And I have compared them. I've conducted geologic provenience studies on artifacts from each major Harappan city, as well as from dozens of smaller settlements. Instrumental neutron activation analysis, mass spectrometry, X-ray diffraction analysis, and many other methods have been employed in this effort. The vast amounts of data we've gathered have enabled us to understand and examine Harappan trade networks in a way that was never before possible. For example, and very briefly, through lead isotope analysis, we've been able to confirm what many scholars have long suspected, that Harappans can obtain much of their copper from sources in and around the Khetri area of northern Rajasthan. But we've also come to learn that the multi-metal deposit at Ambaji in northern Gujarat was a major and widely utilized source of copper and lead during the Harappan period. We've learned through neutron activation analysis that the most Harappan of all materials, steatite, which was used to fashion stamp seals, everything from stamp seals to the ubiquitous steatite bead, mostly came from sources located in what today is northern Pakistan. And using LA ICP-MS, we have been able to trace carnelian from its main sources in Gujarat to sites throughout the Harappan realm, and even to regions well beyond it, like Arabian Mesopotamia. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that I did any of this on my own. If you look at the acknowledgments section of my 2011 book, you will see that names of scores of archaeologists and other researchers that I have worked with and or have been inspired by over the years. And I'll quickly mention three. First, there is Professor Jonathan Mark Knoyer, who was my dissertation advisor, the first person who brought me to the site of Harappa for excavation, and someone who remains, to this day, my most valued friend and collaborator. Plainly stated, I would not be where I am today without Mark Knoyer. Then there is Padma Shri Dr. R.S. Bisht. I cannot overstate his influence. Bishtji's breadth of knowledge regarding Harappan archaeology is matched only by his kindness and generosity. He not only shaped my understanding of the Harappan cultural phenomenon, but by allowing me to analyze artifacts from his excavations at the ancient city of Dholavira, he made an invaluable contribution to my research program, and I am forever grateful to him. Finally, and I have to wrap up here, but because we are here commemorating the 100th anniversary of the announcement of the discovery of the Harappan civilization, I would like to mention someone from that early period that has always been a great inspiration to me. If you look at the later chapters of the big site reports that came from that era, namely Sir John Marshall's Mohenjo-Daro and the Indus Civilization, and M.S. Vats's excavations at Harappa, you will find the contributions of Khan Bahadur Muhammad Sanaullah. Mr. K.B.M. Sanaullah was the Archaeological Survey of India's archaeological chemist during this era of initial discovery. Although his observations and analyses were made a century ago, they remain insightful today and remarkably accurate. This is doubtlessly due to both his research acumen and the application of rigorous scientific principles to the analysis of Harappan archaeological materials. Regardless of one's particular research interest, as we move forward into the next century of Harappan archaeology, we would all be well advised to follow the example of KBM Sanaullah. I thank you all for your time, and I hope to see you, many of you, in person when I visit India and IIT Gandhinagar next year. Thank you, Prabhakar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Randall. Thank you so much for this wonderful message.
Bye, Dennis. Bye, Deep.
Next, I would like to request Professor Nanjot Lahiri, who is with us now. Ma'am, can you please deliver your message.
Okay, so first I want to thank IIT Gandhinagar, especially Dr. Prabhakar, for inviting me for, what is clearly a momentous occasion. I know there are a number of speakers, so I just will take not more than 5 minutes. There are 3 points that I thought are worth reiterating as we look back with the benefit of retrospective appraisal at the discovery of the Indus civilization. I think the first point is that, unlike many other discoveries, in this case, you cannot give credit to any one individual. The discovery of the Indus or the Harappan civilization is not something that we owe to one individual. It is very much an institutional contribution. In many ways, practically all the protagonists in the story of the discovery of the Harappan civilization were connected with the Archaeological Survey of India. There's John Marshall, of course. There is Dayaram Sahani, Madhav Swarup Vats, Rakhaldas Banerjee, and even Luigi Pio Tessitori, because his work was actually financially supported by the Archaeological Survey of India once the Great War, was into its second year. So this is very much an institutional discovery, not an individual discovery. And, with all the issues that we face and the challenges that the Archaeological Survey today faces, I think we tend to forget that this is an organization which does have a moderately glorious history. And it's a pity that that organization has actually not decided to commemorate this. So it's a great thing that at least IIT Gandhinagar is doing it on 20th September 1924. Now, beyond this, the second point that I want to make is that great discoveries are not necessarily made because there are people who feel they are on the verge of making a kind of watershed discovery. So take the case of Rakhaldas Banerjee, who will always be remembered as the Mohenjo-daro man. When Rakhaldas Banerjee went in the winter of 1922 to excavate Mohenjo-daro, he did so with the idea of excavating Buddhist Mohenjo-daro. That is what he was interested in. And naturally, his focus was on the citadel, which has a Buddhist stupa there. It's another matter that very soon his assistant from the PWD, N.S. Chikde, actually found a seal, which Banerjee immediately recognized as being one that belonged to the same genre as what had been found at Harappa, going back, of course, to Alexander Cunningham, but also at that point in time in the more recent excavations of Dayaram Sahni. So Mohenjo-daro really became very, very crucial in this whole story, but it happened inadvertently. It is not as if Banerjee was looking to discover an ancient 3rd millennium BC city. He went there to excavate the Buddhist settlement. And finally, the third point that I want to make is that while this happened in 1922, and he informed Marshall about this a few months later, in the March of 1923, eventually it took more than a year and some months for the enormity of what had been discovered at both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro to be understood. I think there are many reasons for this. One of them was that Banerjee himself was not able to, make that leap of imagination which required understanding Mohenjo-daro as being part of a larger civilizational phenomenon. But I think the more important reason was that John Marshall was away, And when he returned, he decided to go in December 1923, not to Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, which were going to be dug in quick succession at his orders, but back to Taxila, which was really the intellectual and archaeological love of his life. And he had been doing this for 2 seasons, practically every year, since the middle of the second decade of the 20th century. And I always get a feeling that possibly if John Marshall had been less kind of blinkered and disciplined about going back to, where he went every winter, possibly the discovery of the Harappan civilization would have happened a little earlier. So how did it eventually happen? I think a crucial character in this was M.S. Vats. Vats was at this point in time a very junior officer of the Archaeological Survey of India. But after completing a month of excavations at Mohenjo-daro, he wrote to John Marshall, and he drew his attention to the fact that it was not just seals, as Marshall had pointed out, that was similar across Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, but both of them shared a similar building technique. Both of them were brick-built cities, in other words. They had a kindred terracotta art, and there were many other such similarities. It is when this letter reached Marshall in April 1924 that I think he finally decided to come to grips with what was emerging out of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa. And in order to do this, John Marshall did not go either to Mohenjo-daro or Harappa. He instead got all the artifacts and the archaeologists to his head office in Shimla. And it was in the month of June in the hills of Shimla that I think everybody around the table who was looking at this, Marshall, Rakaldas Banerjee, Dayaram Sahni, got a sense that, well, these are not just 2 sites, which go back probably to pre-Mauryan times, but that they were really central to the phenomenon of the Indus civilization. So when lots of people ask me, where do you think the significance of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa was understood? My own sense is this was actually understood for the first time in Shimla. So the discovery of the Harappan civilization happened there. And as a consequence of this long article for the Illustrated London News was written. People have criticized Marshall for publishing this in, a British publication. But I think he did an absolutely correct thing, because there were many things, if you read the article, that were only provisionally understood by the archaeologists of the Archaeological Survey of India, including Marshall. And he hoped by putting it out in a publication which was read by all kinds of scholars and philologists, a sense would emerge about how old this civilization was. And he was proved absolutely right. Maybe the IIT Gandhinagar should also remember that it was exactly 1 week later, on 27 September 1924, that the age of the civilization was finally pointed out, not by the Archaeological Survey, but by AHCS. He did this in the Illustrated London News, where he pointed out that what John Marshall and his colleagues had drawn attention to was even more remarkable than what they imagined, and that it was a 3rd millennium BC phenomenon. Interestingly, John Marshall, in his article in the Illustrated London News, does not give out the fact that he hasn't visited Mohenjo-daro and Harappa at this point in time. He was to visit these sites only, in the early months of 1925. So it's a very interesting story, and I think I was really privileged to get permission from the Archaeological Survey of India to look at the files. Often I have felt that my book, Finding Forgotten Cities, may actually be called, or should have been called, Finding Forgotten Files, because this is a story which has emerged out of the archives of the ASI. And that's why this is a book. It's not just the protagonists of that time who made this discovery, but it was the Archaeological Survey of India which also made it possible for me to do this work. It's dedicated to the ASI for that reason. So thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you, Professor Larry. And we have two distinguished speakers today evening. But before inviting them, I would like to take two more messages. One from Professor Ravi Korisetter.
Thank you, Dr. Prabhakar, for putting me in the loop on this particular momentous occasion. This day, 20 September, is as momentous as the first publication of the discovery of Pallavaram by Robert Bruce Wood in 1866 in the Madras Journal of Literature and Science. Both these announcements by Foote and Marshall heralded the beginning of scientific publications on India's prehistoric past, one making the earliest human settlement, another one on the earliest civilization in the world, and triggered continuing investigations, and it remains an endless endeavor among archaeologists to continue to work on various aspects of Indus civilization. And it has been haunting archaeologists even today, whether it should be called Indus civilization, whether it should be called Harappan civilization, whether it should be called Indus Saraswati civilization. These are very peripheral issues, but there are more important issues relating to the way in which a civilization prospered and also transformed itself, which has already been, many times called a decline of a civilization. But what we see now is that it is transformation and continuity and so on and so forth. And over the last 150 years, the study of Paleolithic and the first civilization in India has progressed leaps and bounds and has placed India at the forefront of global synthesis of human biocultural evolution. In 1911-12, Bhandarkar thought Mohenjo-daro to be about 250 years old. And in 1924, Marshall compared it with Tyrins and Mycenae in Greece. And Masson in 1842 had dated Harappa to 326 BC. Now we know it is 2600 BC old, developed on its own, and commanded a large trade network during the 3rd millennium BC. And in 1947, we lost it to Pakistan. And the loss was more than compensated by the discovery of Kalibangan in 1917, Lothal in 1956, and Dholavira in 1967-68, and perhaps the most well-known site anywhere in India today. In 2026, we will be celebrating 200 years of the discovery of Harappa. And I must remember and thank Dr. Kenoyer, who made it possible for some of us to visit Mohenjo-daro. It was even more momentous and exciting opportunity for us, because I have not been a researcher in the field of Indus Valley civilization, but have been teaching and I'm keeping abreast of the developments in terms of new research and new findings and new understandings and so on. So I congratulate the host for this tremendous event, remembering the first announcement, the discovery of Mohenjo-daro, based on 3 years of excavation at Mohenjo-daro, beginning 1921. Thank you, Prabhakar, and your colleagues for this opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Ravi. We'll take one more message from Dr. Andreas.
Okay, I do not see my slide, but anyway, I just like to remember that our current understanding of the Indus writing system basically is still founded on the early excavations at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Since we are dealing with about 78 of all inscriptions of all inscribed artifacts were excavated at these two major sites at the early excavations. So this is our fundamental research based on these early excavations, and this is the only point I like to emphasize at this special event today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we will start the lectures by the two distinguished scholars. Manjari, sorry, before moving on to the talks, I would also like to request Professor Paolo Biaggi.
So thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting meeting. You know that I'm not a very good specialist in the field because my interest has always been a little bit away from Harappan, Mohenjo-daro, here and whatever. I've been interested in mining, and I did most of my work for 12 years and 40 years, whatever. And after that, I continued mainly thanks to the advice of Professor Han, who was a geologist of Karachi University, places on the coast. My interest was in the coastal archaeology of the northern, still working a little bit on the topic, mainly radiocarbon dated sites, and try to understand what is the chronology of the sites, and so there are not so many material remains, but in some cases they are extremely interesting ones. And also because what I've seen during the last 10 years is that 90% of these sites have been destroyed, and in the near future, all of them will be destroyed. So I've been extremely lucky 20, 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago, in fact, to go around with Professor Han. Also, when those were the times where I could go freely to Las Vegas in Pakistan. Now it is for a while. It's not that easy. And reading some papers which are not so common to most. This, in fact, excellent technologies, neophardies, and whatever, and also in the landscape more than 30 years ago, 150 years ago. So this was a privilege for me. It was excellent. It was very nice. And what I can tell you is that I will try to continue on this topic. Thank you very much. Good luck for Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and all the other sites. I think there's still a lot of work to do on these sites. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So our first speaker is Professor Ajit Prasad. His research interests span from the Stone Age prehistory to Harappan archaeology, and he has worked extensively on Stone Age prehistory of Gujarat. The study areas primarily focus in the Orsang and Sabarmati valleys and eastern margins of Gujarat, and recently in the regions of Kutch. He has excavated Harappan sites in northern Gujarat, Kutch, and Saurashtra from 1800 onwards. Besides that, he's carried out researches that investigated issues of hunter-gatherers transaction and the beginning of agro-pastoral life in the context of early Harappan settlements in northern Gujarat. He's currently involved in Paleolithic investigations in Kutch, along with the study of early Harappan and Harappan cultural development in Gujarat. Some of us have also been fortunate to have been taught by Professor Ajit Prasad, and his presence at the university, at MS University, has really enriched our experience there. Please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I suppose this 100th centenary celebration of the discovery, not the discovery, announcement of the discovery of Indus civilization. Much has actually been said. Before I start my presentation, I would actually be focusing on 2-3 aspects of Indus civilization. Yeah. Yeah. So I would look at one or two or three aspects of Indus civilization. Primarily, it's the way we actually understand the early stages of the civilization today, and then I will look at the kind of regional traits which we come across in different, because Indus civilization is actually going to be spread in different geographical regions. So you do actually come across certain traits within the material culture which are specific to those regions, and try to understand what is the relevance of it in understanding the development of Indus civilization. Louder. Okay, now is it okay? Oh, all right. That is what I want to do. And also I will actually touch upon the post-urban or the late Harappan, the issues regarding the late Harappan. These are the things I would actually touch upon in the presentation. I suppose we have 45 minutes, or how much will be the time? Half an hour? 20. Oh, okay, that would be too short because I have a presentation which may go up to almost. All right. But anyway, thanks very much for this invitation, IIT Gandhinagar and Prapagar and his entire team uh, at this occasion. And so I go here. So before I start, these are as Den, I mean not Dennis, as Randall Lowe said, none of this research is actually done on an individual capacity. It was always a teamwork. There are a lot of researchers, students, and also institutions that are actually involved there. The kind of research or the Harappan research which we did at the MS University. So I was involved with the Harappan research from the middle of 1980s onwards. So in that process, we actually kind of excavated Harappan sites of different categories, the rural settlements, larger kind of townships. So most of them actually belong to went to Gujarat. So, oh, thank you. This is a picture you must have actually come across these days. In most of the presentations where you see this illustrated London news, which actually declaring the discovery of Indus civilization. By the side, you actually see John Marshall, who actually kind of spearheaded the entire work for some time. Although the excavations were actually conducted by his team. The team which was actually headed by John Marshall, it's still booming. So soon after the discovery, there were three major concerns. One is that its geographical spread. It's very preliminary concerns originally. Then its origin, which was actually a concern even those days, because even the understanding the antiquity, that the chronology of Indus civilization was an issue in the beginning. So the origin and chronology, these were the major issues in the 1920s onwards, which actually led to what is known as, in order to understand the spread of Indus civilization, you come across scholars actually started extensive exploration, which actually resulted into the discovery of several sites. So that actually went on in 1947. In fact, if you look at the history of Indus civilization research, 1947 actually is a kind of watershed. Till then, you actually see the pace of explorations and the studies were actually on a particular pace, which was not, one can actually say, very proactive. It is only in 1947, after the partition of the country, of the subcontinent, I mean the India into Pakistan and India. The two major cities, the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, actually went into Pakistan. That actually led to Indian archaeologists to understand the spread of Indus civilization toward the east, that is in the eastern Punjab, Rajasthan, and also in Gujarat. Remember, soon after the discovery of Indus civilization at Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, there was only one site which was actually known, beyond the Indus Valley. That was Rangpur, and the other one was Kotla Nihang Khan, that is in the eastern Punjab, what you call quite close to today's Ropa. These are the only two sites. So that certainly was an indication to kind of, how to actually go about for the new explorations. And these studies were actually spearheaded by several institutions. The Archaeological Survey of India, the major part of it was actually carried out by the Archaeological Survey of India. Then you have some universities and other state departments as well, all of them actually pitching in. There were several surveys, documentation, publication, all this actually happened soon after. Today, if you look at what we have, is more than 2,500 sites which are actually reported in the entire what we call the greater Indus region. That includes almost 1 million square kilometers. And we also know the chronology, as many of our speakers actually mentioned. It stretches from 3,600 BC to 1400 or 1300 BC. That is the way we actually understand the chronological position of Indus civilization, as well as the geographical spread of the civilization today. Now, the chronological framework, as one can actually see in this, it has always been an issue, always been a kind of dialogue among the researchers. How do we exactly understand the development of Indus civilization? This is a scheme originally kind of proposed by Jim Schafer, I think, which was actually kind of, give a much better framework by Mark Neuer, providing dates, because he actually got several series of dates from Harappa excavation. So you can actually see there are several terms which are actually being used. Different researchers actually use different terms. That is essentially because wanting to kind of describe different aspects of the civilization. But the most popular one, in fact, is what we call the early Harappan, the Harappan and the late Harappan. And then you also have pre-urban, urban Harappan, and the post-urban Harappan, which is almost the same. And then the other scheme is that, the regionalization era, the integration era, and localization, which basically describe the process actually went in the development of cultures. Now we will actually kind of look at what we call the antecedent stages of the Indus civilization. Right from the very beginning, the Indus civilization was actually kind of discovered. People were actually kind of thinking about what could actually be the origin. So the initial thought was that it suddenly emerged in its full-fledged form, with having no antecedent stages, and also its end was also believed to be quite abrupt, which was quite unnatural. But I suppose from 1936 onward, there have been actually investigations indicating its origin in many sites in the middle of Indus Basin, as well as the Balochistan region in northern Punjab. So today we know that there are a number of what is known as regional Chalcolithic cultures, which actually kind of contributed toward the urban development, the crystallization of what we call the urban ethos of the Indus civilization. So you can actually see in different regions in Mehergarh, obviously because of its the antiquity and the rich material, forms one of the major cultural assemblages to understand the beginning of this process. And then you actually see that being continued in the Quetta region, with Kiligul Muhammad or Quetta itself. And then as you move towards the middle of the Indus, you have the Amri and Kotdiji sites, which actually shows its development, sequential development. And then you go to the north, you have the Ravi phase, what we call the Ramanderi, Ravi, all these sites which actually shows in the early stages of Indus civilization, what we call the antecedent stages of Indus civilization. Most of the times these are actually identified different sets of ceramic assemblage, because ceramics is a plastic medium which actually helps people to kind of express the cultural traits better than many other objects which are less plastic. That is the reason you do not come across the same amount of kind of variability as we actually come across in the ceramic assemblages and other artifacts. But still, one can actually see that those kind of variability in all these different, what is known as the regional Chalcolithic cultures. In this, the Ravi phase at Harappa is important because it actually, for the first time, a very sound chronological structure framework was actually provided by the excavations carried out by Dales and Canoyer. A series of radiocarbon dates and very, very effectively and efficiently applied to understand the sequential stages. So that actually forms a touchstone for understanding the development in that particular region. One would have actually imagined a similar kind of effort being made in this side of the border, at least in the Gagar Saraswati system, also in Gujarat. There are sites which can actually kind of help us to do that. I suppose there need to be a concerted effort to actually kind of do that now. But that is what is actually kind of missing in, similar kind of a very sound chronological frame in our, many of the, Gagar Saraswati system sites or in Gujarat sites. All right. So I will now come to what exactly the early Harappan scenario in the Gagar Saraswati Basin. One of the sites which actually showed the early Harappan remains very early in the late 50s and 60s. In fact, is Kalibangan. Explored initially by Agos and then excavated by the Archaeological Survey of India in the 1960s. It actually helped to understand and define what is exactly meant by the early Harappan in that region. You have the Sothesis wall kind of an assemblage where, archaeologists actually kind of identified 6 different varieties of ceramic, etc. These are all standard things which you actually come across when you actually started looking at the antecedent stages or the early Harappan assemblages of that region. And it's generally been dated up to almost 2900 BC or 3000 BC. Of late, we have 2-3 sites which actually shows very early date going back. One is actually Kunal. The other is Birana. These 2 sites have actually yielded pretty early dates and also much richer material of the early Harappan. This actually included a lot of what we call the incised ceramics, which are not so very common in the Sothesis wall. And then you have what we call the hakra, where what is known as mud applique kind of ways, which are actually found quite widely spread in the Gagar Saraswati system and further down in the Hakra Cholistan region. And this would have been fine, but what is actually important here is that you could actually see, they actually provided very early date, but there is not much problem with the dates of Kunal. As you can actually see, the date actually is from 3600 or 3500 BC to 2500 BC for the early Harappan context, and then you have several aspects of life which are slightly different from rest of the what has not been actually found from Kalibangan. But Birana site also yielded similar kind of material remains what has been actually found at Kunal. But it actually provided a date going back to almost 8 millennium BC. That actually is, there is actually a kind of mismatch here. As you can, these are the kind of ceramics we actually come across from Kunal, as well as that this one is it. So the Hakraware, etc. I suppose it is quite commonly found even in the Rabi phase, as well as in the Gagar Saraswati system. Rafiq Mughal has actually kind of described and defined this Hakraware quite well from those sites. In addition to that, what you have is all these cultural materials, including copper implements. There are also evidence of what is known as craft production, beads, etc., which are actually found from Kunal and also from Birana. So these things do not actually go against the understanding about the beginning or the early stages of the Indus civilization. What you actually come across is a very clear mismatch in the dates, as you can actually see, it is the dates for the beginning of Chalcolithic farming cultures in this region is somewhere around 7000 BC or 7000, as they claim it is 7000 BC, what is described. There are a lot of different terminologies actually being used here based on one site. It's originally excavated by L.S. Rao. So what you can actually see is that the dates are actually very early. So there is certainly a mismatch between the material culture development and the chronology at Birana. And you have to also remember the sequence is essentially based on a single site showing this very early dates. But what is important is that at this site or none of the sites in this region, you do not come across a substratum for the early Chalcolithic food-producing cultures, which is either Neolithic or the Mesolithic. It is very strange. You know, if you come down in Rajasthan, you do actually come across a lot of Mesolithic hunter-gatherer settlement. But these are actually not found in the upper reaches of the Ghaggar-Saraswati system, not even in Punjab. Why is that? Why we don't come across that is a big challenge for the archaeologists. When you actually have in southern part of Rajasthan, in the same river system, several of these Mesolithic, Microlithic settlements, hunter-gatherer settlement, none of the sites in that region actually have indicated the Mesolithic or the Neolithic substratum. So if you take this for the face value, the early Chalcolithic settlement here suddenly sprang up at around 7000 BC without any antecedent stages. I mean, how did that happen? So it does not actually, that is why there is a mismatch here. So what we need to, so no clear evidence of indigenous Chalcolithic agro-pastoral life so far in that region. So it is therefore we need to actually there are two things one can actually do. One is that we actually get to reascertain the date by carefully excavating and collecting samples and dating them from different labs to see if there is something wrong with the actual date. The other thing is that to find out the actual cultural process. Where why are we missing this, what is known as the Neolithic or the Mesolithic substratum in this region? These are the things, these are the real contentious issues in the early understanding the early Harappan cultural development and very early antiquity of it, as has been claimed by some of the archaeologists from the very beginning of the Indus civilization in that region. Then we come to the southern, that is in Gujarat. This is an area which we have actually worked. So I will actually deal with that a little more deeper than the other one. So what actually you can actually see, there are 3-4 colored regions here. These are the areas, that is one in North Gujarat and then the other in the Saurashtra coast. You actually come across pockets where you actually come across early Chalcolithic or early Harappan kind of assemblages. And these have been actually dated by several radiocarbon dates to 3600 BC onwards. And it is actually, as you can actually see, we do have what is known as, what is generally found in North Gujarat is described as Anartha, Anartha being the traditional name of that North Gujarat region. Then you have the part is known as the Padri assemblage, which is named after the site where it was actually first reported. And the assemblage which you come across at Anartha and Padri are quite similar. And also date-wise, they are same. So very little if you mix them together, it's very difficult to actually distinguish the two. Whereas Priprabha, slightly later in time, is entirely different. And that is found in the Saurashtra coast as well as in North Gujarat, a place known as Dathrana. Clearly suggesting there appears to have these agro-pastoral, Chalcolithic agro-pastoral communities living in Gujarat as early as 3600 BC onwards. In addition to that, you also come across, apart from these 3 sites, you also have what is known as assemblages, which are very similar to what you come across in the Codigian or the Amri kind of early Harappan in that region. So this actually there's a slightly complex scenario that is actually emerging because of the interaction of different regions. You do actually come across many of the ceramic assemblages, also the cultural assemblages actually getting mingled in this region. Most of these are actually found in North Gujarat, and it actually trickles down into Saurashtra. Now, the type site for understanding the Anartha is Loteshwar. That is where it was first excavated, and it has been actually kind of reasonably well dated by several, AMS as well as conventional radiocarbon dates. All of them actually indicating from 3,700 BC to 3,000 BC, and unlike the Gagar Saraswati system in North Gujarat, we have a very rich Mesolithic substratum, hunter-gatherer substratum, which actually dates back to 7,500 BC. There is a series of dates ranging from 7,000 BC from different sites. Datrana has dates, you have Loteshwar has actually dates, all of them in the Mesolithic context or the Microlithic context date back to 7,000 BC onwards up to 4,700 BC. So this region was actually inhabited by the hunters and gatherers before the beginning of what we call the Chalcolithic farming kind of emerged. Okay. So this, I will just very quickly show you the characteristic ceramic assemblages of the Anartha. You can see this. The feature here is that they are all mostly handmade or turntable made pottery, showing use of polychrome or bichrome paintings. The vessel shapes, etc., are actually different. So these are the sites. This is the site Loteshwar, and the other, this is Datrana, both in North Gujarat. So here you actually come across the Anartha assemblages. You actually come across the second one, what we generally call the pre-Prabhas assemblage, because it is actually first reported from Somnath, that is Prabhas Patan in Saurashtra coast, I suppose as early as 1950s. But pre-Prabhas was actually reported in 1970s. So dated to 1700 BC. So you can actually see in this, you can see a lot of corrugated vessels, no paintings in this case. There is no painting at all. And you have a lot of incised vessels, applique decorations, etc., which are not found in the Anartha type of pottery. Surprisingly, you also do come across black and red ware. Black and red ware going back to 3,300 BC, and the shapes of black and red ware you come across in this are entirely different from what you come across in the Harappan or in the Ahar Balatal assemblages. So black and red ware appears to have different origins in this region, essentially. But along with this pre-Prabhas as well as the black and red ware, pre-Prabhas and the Anartha, you also do have, this is the early Harappan kind of, which are very similar to what you come across at Amari or Cotigian sites of the early Harappan. The vessel forms and the decorations, I can actually show this. So along with that, you also come across, with the basic distinction here is that this actually shows a wheel-made pottery. This is for the first time in Gujarat Chalcolithic assemblages come across the use of fast wheel. So that's a new technology being actually introduced, and then you come across the vessel forms also kind of different. In addition to that, you also come across first, concrete evidence of bead production, early Harappan bead production, disc beads, and most of them are actually very crude disc beads. And then you can also see these, drill bits of local chalcedony. So the Ernestite, the real, Harappan drill bits were unknown at that time during the early Harappan times. It was actually kind of, they actually come to understand the qualities of Ernestite much later. The early Harappan times, you do not come as Ernestite. So they have been actually trying to drill the beads using this local material. It would have been really, really strenuous. But you can actually see this, the early Harappan, huge production of beads at this particular site. And similar kinds of beads are actually found from, you come across that at Kunal. You come across that at, I do not know whether it was being made at Birana, but then Kunal, you can see unfinished beads, which essentially means that the bead production probably would have been actually happening in a small scale over there. And there is another place you come across similar kind of attempt to make the beads, small carnelian beads, Ganeshwar, which is in Rajasthan, in the, further south of Kunal and Birana. And you can see at the Ravi phase where the similar kind of disc beads were actually been very crude production of beads. So what you actually see is that carnelian disc beads and indicating the cultural contact probably that existed during the early Harappan times among different regions. You have North Gujarat, then you have Rajasthan, and then you further up in Punjab, in Rajasthan, all of them actually showing a similar technological development, and also the raw material. One does not know from where exactly, but one source this carnelian was actually going, or different sources were actually kind of incorporated. These are some of the interesting areas that can actually answer the kind of interaction, the template of interaction that existed during the early Harappan times. Now, we were talking about the early Harappan Cotigian or Amri kind of assemblages you come across in North Gujarat and Kutch. This has been actually revealed by several of these early Harappan burials, which we actually discovered in mostly in North Gujarat and as well as in Kutch. So there are in many the Harappan burials which have been discovered, or not even early Harappan. We have, I suppose, maximum number of early Harappan burials are actually found in Kutch and North Gujarat. If you look at the distribution, that is what it actually indicates. You have Nal burials, obviously showing the early Harappan. Then you have the Harappan burials at Harappa. The Kalibangan has early Harappan burials. And then you have, burials here. You have burials, 3 burials here. These two, the red spot, these are all the Harappan burials, whereas these are early Harappan burials in North Gujarat. Then in Kutch, you have 3 or 4 early Harappan burials. So these early Harappan burials, actually, these are the potteries you generally come across in the early Harappan burial. These potteries are quite similar to what we come across in the Amri or Cotigian sites. And that is what helped us to actually understand the cultural affiliation as well as the antiquity of these burials. Yes, we did actually, of late, we actually kind of excavated one of those early Harappan burials at Daneti, and similar kind of burials were actually found at Juni Khatia, which has been actually excavated by the Kerala University. So we can actually see that here. That is the site of Daneti. There are more than 46, but this is a small settlement, just what you call a cemetery kind of thing. There is no evidence of any habitation at the site. These are just burial grounds. There are more than 46 burials which we could actually kind of locate from the surface indications, and we actually excavated a few of them. So there are many different kinds of burials. You have what is known as extended inhumation burials. You have actually kind of burials, symbolic burials. There are no skeleton which has actually been found. There are burials with cap. These are not just these are very large burials. The largest of the burial is almost 5 meters in length. You don't need that 5 meter long grave pit to bury the person. You need only 6 feet. So this is 5 meters, and then you have to. The whole 5 meter was actually filled with the ceramics. That's exactly what you actually see in here. You can see this is around 3.5 meters. This is around 4.5 meters. This one is the biggest. This is actually kind of 5.5 meters. So some of them do have capstone, some of them do not have capstone, but then it actually contains a humongous amount of pottery. The maximum number of pottery we have is 54 in number, and the smallest one is just 2. So it actually varied from 54 to 2. But interestingly, all these potteries actually show the early Harappan features, or the Cotigian, or I'll quickly go, otherwise we don't have time. So you have this different kinds of beakers, which you do not actually come across in the classical Harappan context, or mostly very commonly found in the early Harappan context in the Indus Valley sites. You also have some very rare graveware, which actually been shown there. Anyway, this is a chart which actually shows the similarities of the burial pottery which we come across at Daneti, and also from Kotiji, and that is mostly from the Kotiji. So in addition to that, there are local pottery which and indicating the reserved slipware. The kind of reserved slipware which we come across is not the kind of reserved slipware which is associated with the urban phase Harappans. It is different kinds of reserved slipware which you actually see. What I mean to say is that it actually shows the differences and the local features as well. Reserved slipware is not actually found in the Cotigian assemblages, neither at Amri or Kotiji in the Indus Valley. Yes, So these kind of flanged vessels, which are very commonly found in the Daneti burials, are actually found from Ramanderi, as well as from, one of the early Harappan habitation site in North Gujarat, that is Moti Pipli. So which primarily indicate that there are early Harappan settlements which are actually quite widely spread in Kutch as well as in North Gujarat. It's only a question of how you are able to kind of identify them. And in these burials, you do actually come across what we call there are no other burial ornaments except these bangles. No bead. There are one or two shell beads. And these corrugated broad bangles, as you can see, they are actually found here. And then the shell bangles are the only kind of ornaments you come across in these burials. And then, one of those burials actually have 24 small burials. Unfortunately, there would have been certainly a skeletal, but then this is completely kind of gone, disintegrated and gone. That's primarily because of the very acidic nature of the soil. In some places, you do actually come across the skeletal remains kind of intact. So that's a story about the early Harappan burials, and then almost similar kind of burials were actually been excavated by the Kerala University, excavated by S.P. Rajesh. So there are a lot of differences as well. You actually come across burial chambers with the stone masonry, which are not found at Daneti, but he also came across some of the burials, animal burials as well, cattle burials as well. So, and then the pottery which you come across in these burials are pretty similar to what we come across in Daneti, indicating that these practices were quite prevalent in the early Harappan population of that region. Now, what you actually see, some of these reflections are actually found in the Dholavira burials. Dholavira has many unique burials, probably indicating the continuity of the tradition from the continuity of the early Harappan tradition in the urban phase. So the ceramics which you come across in none of the Dholavira burials are indicating the early Harappan features. They actually indicate the Harappan features. That is where we see, although the architecture, burial architecture is a continuation, but the ceramics did actually change, indicating probably a continuity of the tradition. I will just very quickly focus upon the other aspect which I mentioned is the regional traits you come across in the Harappan context. I will once again actually take Gujarat as an example because that is where the regional traits are well defined than the eastern, that is in the Gagar Saraswati system. Probably the Harappan assemblages in that region has not been actually kind of examined and studied in the light of that. So in the case of Gujarat, what happened was that if you are actually familiar with the Harappan assemblages in Gujarat, you will immediately come to know, and if you are familiar with the kind of Harappan assemblage you come across in the Indus Valley, you will immediately come to know there are certain differences. Absolutely, you do come across many of the aspects which are actually shared, but there are many aspects which are different. This has been actually noticed right from the very beginning. With the Rangpur was actually kind of excavated and known. While the first excavator said it certainly belonged to the Indus civilization, second excavator actually kind of doubted whether it could be sub-Indus, because he could actually see differences. And the third excavator actually said it is post-Harappan. It is nothing to do with Harappan. So there are a lot of differences which has been actually noticed by the archaeologists. Even Subbarao, when he actually examined in his book, he actually called it as Kattiwad Harappan. Don't confuse it with Swarat Harappan. He was only expressing the later phase. His idea was that the Harappan assemblages you come across in Gujarat, Saurashtra especially, are of later period, not essentially belong to the urban phase of Indus civilization. So he actually called it Kathiawad Harappan in order to describe or in order to emphasize the regional traits which are quite evident in the ceramic assemblages. But then the concept of this actually changed when the Rojri was excavated by what is his name? Greg Posel in the 1980s, and then and the radiocarbon dating, he actually got a date which was contemporary with the urban phase of Indus civilization, 2600 BC, 2500 BC, consistently. So that is when Possel and Ravel and also Frank Herman, who was actually studying the pottery. They came up with this hypothesis, actually a manifestation of regional traits or regional manifestation of the Harappa culture in Saurashtra, which actually shows the regional traits in ceramic assemblages and other things as well. So the Surat Harappan as a concept, as well as its chronological position, has been extremely well defined on the basis of a series of radiocarbon dates and also specific cultural features which are generally ascribed to the ceramic assemblages as well as other things from Saurashtra. These are the difference you can actually see in the ceramic assemblage, which is very easily perceptible. You have one side, you have the classical Harappan ceramics, whereas on the other side, you have the ceramics you generally come across in the Saurashtrian side, which are, you can see they're different. The painting style is different. The vessel forms are actually different. But the technology-wise, they are at par. They are very, very same. That's exactly what Possel said. It is a technological manifestation in the regional traits. The difference is also, you can actually see the way the towns, the settlements were actually planned. The Harappan, of course, the classical Harappans, they do have a settlement plan, which is very, everyone knows, is a tripartite or bipartite kind of planning. And you actually do come across a similar kind of planning, but very simplistic, which is tending towards a kind of fortification, etc., but having an open space in most of the larger settlements. There are very few. Surat Harappan sites are generally very, very small. You can see this, sorry. Yeah, the average 10.8 for the classical Harappan, whereas average 3.5 for the Surat Harappans. They're very small rural settlements. There are very few which are actually large settlements. Okay, but then they do actually have a fortification which was not as massive like the classical Harappan. So primarily, you do come across some resemblance or some likeness of the planning, but not as exacting as the classical Harappans you actually come across throughout the classical Harappan settlement, where be it at Tholavira or at Lothal or at Mohenjo-daro or Harappa, you come across a very set pattern, which is not actually found in the Surat Harappan settlements. That is one thing, but the real difference is actually found in the subsistence. The subsistence essentially is both in the Harappan, classical Harappan and the Surat Harappan. You have, as far as the animal husbandry is concerned, the one and the same. Sheep, goat, etc., were actually domesticated in both the cases, whereas. But the difference actually you come across in the crop production. Whereas the classical Harappan sites like Indus Valley or even in the Ghaggar Saraswati system, the dependence was on winter cultivation, wheat, barley based cultivation, which is actually much less in Saurashtra region, which is more of what a summer cultivation. That you have a lot of millet. There are more than 6 different millets which are actually found from the Gujarat Surat Harappan sites or Gujarat Harappan sites. Even in the classical Harappan sites in Gujarat, they have to actually depend on this summer crops because Gujarat is located in a semi-arid region. You cannot actually go for winter cultivation. Wheat and barley was certainly cultivated. Probably they were being used at special occasions, whereas the staple food essentially was different kinds of millet. We actually have evidence from the charred grains as well as some phytolase as well as starch grain analysis. All of them actually shows the extensive cultivation or extensive exploitation of local millets and local food grains. And the beginning of this actually goes back to what is known as the 3600 BC, beginning of the food producing cultures in this region. So you see that tradition actually being continued in the Harappan sites in Gujarat. Now, when we actually come to the urban phase, that is where we actually have craft production in a big way enter in the picture, which actually resulted. These were the engines of what we call the urbanization. Without craft production, probably urbanization would not have actually happened. So that essentially the craft items, the raw material for craft production are located far and wide, far off places that need to be integrated. So integrated for the efficient production of the craft items, like be it shell bangles, be it different kinds of ornamental beads, semi-precious stone beads, or even metal objects. So all these things you need to actually kind of source the raw material and use them for the extensive production of craft items. So that actually resulted into what we call, the emergence of major centers of craft production like Dholavira or Lothal. These are the major centers. But in addition to that, you also do have smaller centers, which actually kind of contributed toward the larger economic production setup of the Harappans, which were actually the engines of urbanization. So all these sites, most of the sites do actually show what we call the household production, or sometimes a slightly enlarged production of craft items. So be it bead or shell. In Gujarat, as you can actually see, because the raw material for shell artifact production, raw materials are actually found in the Arabian coast. So it is quite natural you come across processing of these shell items. Actually, sites processing the shell items are actually found all along the coast or in Gujarat. So that's exactly what we actually come across. We have this small little site which you actually come across at Bagasra, where we have a very small site of just less than 2 hectares. And if you take the fortified area, it is just 1/3 of a hectare. 1/3 of a hectare, 0.3 hectares. Okay, in that you actually come across workshops of craft production, which includes bead production, stone bead production, which also includes faïence production, and also includes a lot of the shell working areas. So we were lucky to actually come across one of the very well preserved shell working area at this place. As you can see, piles of raw material, and at different stages of production, there is a box containing these cut shells, which are not polished, yet to be polished. It's kind of a workshop. Luckily, it is reasonably well preserved. That is found within the fortified area. And then you also have in the same area, in the same fortified area, you have evidence of what is known as faïence production. As you can see, this is an area which was probably used for the faïence production. You can see these are all the beads under different stages of production which has been found from this region. And by the side of it, you also have, as you can see, a stone bead production, piles of raw material being actually kind of stored in silos. There are 3 or 4 silos in the small little area, which actually contain the actual raw material. And then you have evidence of bead production, beads actually showing different stages of production in this region. I think I should. Okay, I'm not going to go through this primarily because this is that earnestite material. It has been proposed to be actually the raw material source is proposed to be somewhere in Kutch or northern part of Gujarat. I suppose there is a team which is actually working on to understand the whole process of earnestite. So the issue is that earnestite can actually kind of withstand the immense heat which is actually produced while actually kind of use it for drilling. The other materials actually snap because of its special crystalline structure. So these qualities were, till these qualities were known and its utility was actually understood by the Harappan, bead production was a very tedious process. Once it actually understood, the bead production actually took off. And that actually contributed immensely in the urban growth. And I suppose Gujarat, therefore, actually played a very seminal role in the urban growth of Indian civilization. First, it's shell bangles as a raw material, and then most of the semi-precious stones, be it carnelian, agate, or other, they're all coming from Gujarat. And then it has been proposed that the earnestite, the raw material, without which they could not have actually efficiently drilled the beads. And without drilling properly, you cannot actually have a very efficient bead craft. So Gujarat did actually play a very important role in the production. Another thing which I wanted to highlight is the textile, which did not actually get the due attention, primarily because there are very little evidence of it, material evidence of it actually found. The actual object is never found. What you actually come across is impressions of textile impressions, which accidentally came on to the potteries or clays, or sometimes when on the copper objects, and also the little threads and ropes which are actually been made, and then it has been actually kind of used for sealing, and then that impression, all actually indicating that this was one of the major craft items, craft product produced by the Harappan, for which we have very little studies so far conducted. I suppose that needs a proper attention. The textile, yeah, you have this textile from different places. I'm sorry, yeah. Now, I will just very quickly go through this. This is about the decline and the climatic. One of the things which are quite fashionable these days, that because after the Fortu Magellan event, which actually mostly coincides with the declining phase of Indus civilization, it has been actually there were many theories and hypotheses which actually argued this could have been one of the major reasons for the decline of Indus civilization. There must be some truth in that. But then what one can actually see is that many of the Indus sites actually did undergo those kind of traumas in the history of their cultural development. That is what one can actually see. So one cannot actually deny there was adverse climatic event that actually happened from 4.2 kilo years, which actually the beginning of an aridification for a longer period of time. But how severe was the effect of this in the Harappan domain is a big question mark. How exactly it actually kind of impacted in different sites, and whether it actually eventually led to the decline of Indus civilization is a question one has to really ask. And this needs further investigation. What one can see is that this is one of the trenches in Bagasra, where you actually see, if you look at this, the bottom part of it is quite uneven, indicating a very violent event, which actually kind of completely eroded those material, and then it's almost 1 meter thick. It's completely kind of deposited, and when you are excavating, it is inexplicable. Why is this sudden thing? And this is also found in the inner, this is outside the fortification. This is inside the fortification. You have almost 1.5 to 2 meter thick deposit. It has been estimated to be around 2,300 to 2,200 BC. That's the time period stratigraphically one can assign to it. There is no actual date from this. And when we were actually excavating, this was actually found abutting in the wall, fortification wall. And when we are actually excavating, we thought there is no cultural material below this, because it's almost 2 meters, almost sterile. There is hardly any pottery. So thinking that we have touched the virgin soil, that is what we actually thought. And then after 2 meters, again, the same thing, the culture, there were another 2.5 meters of deposit, as you can see, almost 3 meters deposit below. So this was inexplicable. This is the same, this is the reflection of the same, catastrophic event, which kind of destroyed the old settlement. And this was actually filled up, just yellow silt and sand with almost sterile deposit, indicating there was some catastrophic event that the site has actually undergone similar kind of catastrophic event somewhere around 2200 BC. So this is Magellan event is actually the arid. We are actually talking about a local event, which which kind of led to erosion, kind of a tsunami or a kind of torrential rain, floods, etc. And a similar thing was actually found the site which is located just across the Gulf of Kutch. Bagasra is on the northern edge of the Gulf of Kutch, and Shikarpur is 20 kilometers further north in the southern edge of the Gulf of Kutch. So you can actually see this. You see this line actually shows the event that actually completely destroyed and then filled. This is entirely filled with sterile deposit once again. Okay, so you can actually see this. This has been actually dated around 2200 BC, 22 to 2300 BC. So it is not on not just at one side. There are at least 2 sides, and then we actually looked at the other sides as well. You can actually see this. This is the fortification wall at Shikarpur. This event actually completely kind of eroded, washed away the entire fortification. Remember, this fortification wall is around almost 8 meters in thickness. That has been completely eroded and taken away. And then they kind of rebuild this thing. You can actually see this is the rebuilding. So that is important. Even in this case and later case, what you see is that this event did not actually stop them. They did not abandon. They kind of rebuilt, and the urban way of life actually continued in spite of the setback. Okay, so 2200 BC, that is 4.2 kilo event, does not necessarily mean that it actually was the major reason for the decline of Indus civilization. They could actually kind of withstand these kind of what is known as adverse events without much of an issue. It's the same thing I was actually looking through this strata at Dholavira. You can actually see this has been dated around again 2300 BC. So almost 1.5 meter, 2 meter thick deposit here, almost sterile. So it is there at Kanmir as well. So what we are talking about is not just a local event, it's a regional event, which actually kind of have a bad impact or an adverse impact to the most of the sites which are located along the coastal region. Okay, so this 4.2 event coincides with the peak of the Harappan economic production. 4.2, 4.3, that exactly the peak of the Harappan economic production. From that time onwards, there is a setback which actually slowly kind of started declining. So stagnation and weakening of economic base started somewhere around 2100 BC, not prior to that. If you actually look at the date, it is around 2100 BC stagnation and the weakening of economic things, and also the structural activities actually becoming slower. All that actually happening from 2100 BC onwards, and they still continue up another 200 years. With whatever economic steam they actually had. So decline was slow, and what you can actually see is that decline was not abrupt, it is slow and perceptible in the archaeological records if you actually look at them. So what one can actually, kind of conclude from this is that 4.2K event may have triggered a spiral of adverse climatic events that eventually kind of hitting the economic activities. That is what you actually perceive in the material remains. But the major issue, in fact, is none of these things. I think the absence of innovation by the Harappans. Harappans have actually become completely stagnant from, if you look at the economic technological technologies the Harappan used, they actually started peaking around 2600, 2500 BC. No new technology was actually added for almost 700 years. It's the same shell bangles, same copper, same bead production, nothing new, no innovations. So it has actually kind of plateaued out. You cannot go any more up. It has to, with the same technology, there is a saturation point has come. Any event, adverse event, climatic or otherwise, will only kind of adversely affect their economic activity. That's exactly probably what happened. So the inability of the Harappans to innovate and change in due course of time probably is one of the major reasons for the decline of Indus civilization. So if you don't change, you are perished to doom. That's probably the case in the case of the Harappans. So it is economic stagnation that eventually resulted. Even when their economy was actually kind of progressing well, adverse climatic events were actually did not affect the economic activities much. Okay, I think we will the later part, the post-urban phase. I suppose after 1900 BC, most of the urban ethos were completely forgotten. And what you actually come across is the emergence of the local trades. That is very evident in the case of in Gujarat. It is also evident, as you can actually see in the here, that is known as Jukhar, the southern part of the Indus Basin. And its symmetry edge is an enigma, because you do not come across an early features of reflected in the symmetry edge. It actually shows totally different kinds of ceramics and ceramic. There are some things which are carried on, but the painting style, the vessel form, they're all essentially different. That is clearly an enigma. But then these actually shows the re-emergence of the earlier traditions at Jukhar as well as in Saurashtra. So you can actually see these circular structures, which are generally identified the post-urban phase of Indus civilization. This is from Dholavira. So the end of Harappan, that is the how exactly and when exactly the post-urban phase or the late Harappan phase come to an end is there is no radiocarbon date, because most of them are just estimations. Actual date of the lower end of the date, there is no radiocarbon. So most of them are 1500 BC, that is, or 14. There are not even sites showing a 1400 BC. So I suppose there is a need to actually kind of identify sites of the post-urban phase and then date some systematically using radiocarbon dates to understand what actually is the cutoff date, when exactly the Harappan ethos completely vanished. So for that, we need to actually identify the what you call the post-urban late Harappan sites and then excavate them. So you can actually see here, in the case of these sites, there is a continuity you actually see, whereas in Gujarat, what you see is the early historic period starts somewhere around 500, 400 BC. And the Harappan, the post-urban phase of the Harappan purportedly end with 1300 BC. There is a huge gap of almost 700, 800 years. And what happened? There is no real cultural material indicating that time gap in Gujarat. So it is not possible that people actually completely deserted that region. It's quite unimaginable. So why are we not actually coming across any of the material culture? This is the real big question with the challenge with the archaeologists have to actually kind of they have to take up. So there are a few sites, as you can actually see here, and these two sites in Kutch, they have actually given dates going back to 1300 BC and 1100 BC. The dates are actually quite doubtful. I suppose we had to actually think whether this, how exactly one can actually kind of appreciate these dates in association with the material culture it is associated with. But yet there are some sites which are actually showing a date going back to 1100 BC and 1300 BC, which are actually not found in any one of the sites in Gujarat. Other sites in Gujarat, you have many other sites which actually shows the early Harappan, early historic sites, but none of them actually have shown in a continuity from the Harappan to the early Harappan. That's what is generally described as the dark period or dark age in Gujarat's history, cultural development of Gujarat. That, I suppose, is something which one has to actually kind of think of and then identify sites and then kind of excavate, date, and try to understand what exactly was actually happening during that particular period. And thank you very much for your patience. I suppose I took a lot of time. Do we have a question and answer or no? Later. Yeah, done. Sorry that.
Are you taking questions, Dr. Ajit Prasad?
Yes.
No, not now. Dr. Ajit Prasad, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you very much for taking us on long pilgrimage of archaeological sites, right from Ghaggar Valley, Indus Valley, down to Saurashtra, Kutch, and North Gujarat and all that. And you very rightly pointed out that there is a mismatch between the cultural sequence of recovered at Bhirdana and Mehergarh. Definitely mismatch. There is something wrong in excavation. It seems that after the first period, the entire site was abandoned, or later one dressed down later on, over which a new settlement took place. As a second thing, the map of the plan of the Dholavira that you have shown was prepared before excavation.
Okay.
On the basis of the on the basis of the study of the surface features. But there are, in many articles, the plan after excavation is published.
Hmm.
The second thing, the section prepared by Anindya Sarkar that you saw gives a very distorted picture. Please remove it. eh? And you better rely on the section I prepared and published.
True.
Otherwise,
Thank you, Bishji. I mean, your comments, especially that the Dolavira sections. Yeah, I certainly would kind of clarify and rectify those Sarkar's, which has been actually published. So we have access to that published material. So it's actually looking at what was the stratigraphy at Dolavira was actually telling us. So I found this being published. So I just therefore used it for the purpose of illustrating my point of what is known as the kind of catastrophic event the site suffered. Please open.
I have given my remarks already. I finished. My remarks are over. I have thanked you profusely for your highly illustrative, packed with information.
Thank you, sir.
So I am reminding of the storehouse of Lothal.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you very much. I mean, you have given us you threw much light on many of the things which you yourself excavated
Yeah.
and which some others have excavated. But the only request is kindly put that that down plan of Dholavira, which was published after excavation. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
And section prepared by Anindya Sarkar is extremely distorted. Avoid it. Eh? Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will be in touch with you to get corrected the map.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. It was like revisiting one of your proto-historic lectures. And thank you, Bish, sir, for your insights. Our next speaker is Dr. Dennis Furness. He obtained his PhD in archaeology on Indus civilization, external trade from the University of Bologna in 2011, currently investigating long-range trade and cross-cultural interactions between urban-level societies in South and Middle Asia during the Bronze Age, with a specific focus on Indus Valley and Oman. This research involves a wide range of theoretical and methodological approaches, including ancient administrative and writing systems, traditional technologies and crafts, iconography and art styles, and social, economic, and political organizations. He directed archaeological excavations in India and Oman and worked on archaeological collections with several museums and archaeological expeditions in India, Pakistan, Oman, UAE, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, establishing an extensive network of academic and research partnership. Presently, he is the advisor for archaeology and heritage to Ministry of Heritage and Tourism of the Sultanate of Oman. Sir, we would like you to come.
So thank you very much for being here this afternoon. It's a great privilege and honor for me to be been invited by IIT Gandhinagar to be here for these 2 months as scholar in residence, and by chance, this very day fall into my period here. So I was invited to present my research and some discussion about this momentous event. And so thank you again, Prabhakar, for organizing this event, which is for all of us, is probably very special day. So my very presentation at the moment is entitled Beyond Melucca, 100-year-long periplus of the Lower Sea. And I will take you into a very short, fast, because we are a little bit late, tour of the interaction of the Indus civilization with all other regions of Western and Central Asia, which also in Sumerian language, Melucca, which was the term used in the Sumerian and Akkadian text to identify, let's say, the Indus civilization, probably more than the greater Indus Valley. Apparently, they had a very superficial understanding from a geographical perspective of this region, but from a cultural perspective, they had quite a clear idea. And the Lower Sea, which is present-day Persian Arabian Gulf. So I wanted, just to give a little bit of understanding of what I will discuss, starting from the title. So you have already seen many, many times this slide today, but excuse me a little bit of discussion again on the discovery of, or the presentation of Sir John Marshall, because the discovery, of course, was quite a long process. So we are celebrating today the announcement of the Indus civilization, of this new civilization, new cultural phenomenon into the history of humankind. So it's very important that, as John Marshall said, this is an important addition for the history of humankind. Of course, it's very important for India, but I will never emphasize enough how important this phenomenon, this civilization, is for the whole of humankind. So what is interesting in my presentation, in our presentation today, is that, as was already said before, when John Marshall announced the discovery of Indus civilization, he also admitted that he had no real clue or precise idea about the chronology and the dating of this cultural phenomenon. So 1 week later, Archibald says he, through comparison with mainly objects and seals found at the city of Susa in Elam in Western Iran, he was able to provide quite a precise chronological framework to this civilization. So already from the very beginning of the research about the Indus civilization, connection with, let's say, external trade or connection with foreign regions became very, very important for the definition of this cultural phenomenon. And again, this chronology was confirmed through comparison with a little bit better known sites in Mesopotamia. So you already know all the papers and research by Assyriologists, and I will not go into the details. And this is also interesting. You will see this later, the announcement of the discovery of seals and cultural traits that are somehow mixed, let's say hybrid, between the Indus cultural traits and the local, which will be somehow a thread that I will follow in the entire of my presentation. Because, as I will say at the end, one of the main, if not the main, feature of Indus external trade is that it was not an external trade somehow. It was more an intercultural interaction So I will return to this concept later in the presentation. So as an Italian, I don't want to say proud because it's not, we are citizens of the world mainly today. But in any case, it's interesting to notice that even before Sir John Marshall's announcement in 2024, another scholar of Italian origin already had the chance to propose the prehistoric dating of the Indus phenomenon through very small excavation at the site that was later known as Kalibangan, a very important Indus site in Rajasthan. Unfortunately, this is a beautiful story, and it's a little bit sad and tragic somehow, because Luigi Pio Tessitori, he was working directly under Sir John Marshall. He was mainly interested in studying the bards of Rajasthan. He was in India with 1-year appointment. And he also agreed to be financed a little bit, of course, by the ASI to dig some site, to map some archaeological site. He did this small excavation in Kalibanga, and he found material cultures that were, according to him, of evident protohistorical dating. And he found some inscribed materials that, of course, he was a philologist, so they captured his attention. And he wanted to submit a comprehensive, a little bit more insightful report to Marshall. So before submitting the report, he contacted some experts, some Assyriologists and linguists, Indologists in the UK before submitting the report to Marshall. Unfortunately, his mother passed away, so he went back to Italy in 1919. And on his way back to India, he got probably Spanish fever, and he passed away, suddenly passed away before he was able to submit the report to Marshall. And yesterday, I read again his letter, his notebooks, and the very last words he wrote on his notebooks were, "India, India, I love you. And I hope these last months that will remain to spend here will last forever." And 2 days after, he passed away, or a few days after. So I wanted to remember him. He was a very young guy. He was 30 when he passed away. And he kind of embedded all the dreams we have as PhD scholars, postdoc scholars, of the love for this country and this culture. So I wanted to remember him in this occasion, mainly for the spirit of his commitment with this culture and this country, than for the fact that by chance he was not the first to announce the prehistoric dating of the Indus. So if you are interested in this, to deepen this story, there is, of course, the beautiful book of Dr. Lahiri, or there is also a beautiful website by the Luigi Pio Tessitori Foundation in Italy with all unpublished notes he took about during his period here in India. So after the announcement and after the first excavation and the publication of the big reports from the excavation of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, of course, the Indus civilization entered into the history of humankind, into the manuals of history, and scholars like Gordon Childe immediately emphasized, highlight the original characters of many cultural features of the Indus that somehow contrasted what was known at the time about Egypt and Mesopotamia. I will not go through this today. This is a little bit out of focus, but still it's very interesting that since the very beginning of the research about the Indus, intelligent scholars like Gordon Childe, they immediately got the point that the Indus civilization was something a little bit different, original, and this is one of the reasons probably why we are so interested in this phenomenon, and we find it so fascinating. So Mortimer Wheeler, on his side, he was a little bit, he had a different idea. And he believed that, as he said, that the very idea of civilization came to the Indus from Mesopotamia, basically. And now we know that he was wrong. He was definitely wrong. We know without any possible doubt that the Indus civilization is just the peak of a cultural indigenous phenomenon rooted in the Mesolithic and Neolithic period through the Chalcolithic. So, sorry, Wheeler, you were wrong. So if, of course, going back to external trade, there are several amazing books summarizing the data and presenting them, interpreting them. I will not, because I will not present all the data available. This is a huge, of course, topic. And if you are interested, there are amazing books by many scholars, and from both the archaeological and textual perspectives, because the industrialization and import are often mentioned in cuneiform texts of different types. So if you are interested, there are many amazing publications. What is interesting to stress here is the fact that Indus external trade and intercultural connection between the Indus Valley and other regions of Western and Central Asia in the third millennium were part of what Greg Possel, the late Greg Possel, termed the Middle Asian interaction sphere. This definition and term is a little bit debated, but there is no doubt that we are discussing about something larger, bigger, and very complex. So what I will try to do now is to try to discuss and understand what was the role of the Indus civilization and the Indus merchant, craftspeople in defining, shaping, sustaining, fostering this phenomenon. So I recently published a paper on this, and I will basically follow what I wrote in the paper. So if you are interested, you can find it online. Of course, this will only be a very short summary. So long distance trade began in the greater Indus Valley in the Neolithic period. We have evidence in the grave of Mehrgar during the 7th and 6th millennium of objects and raw materials arriving from far away, from mountains in the Badakhshan in southern Afghanistan, like 700 kilometers far away, or along the coast of the Arabian Sea, 500 kilometers to the south. So conceptually, long-distance trade is a very fundative phenomenon of the Indus phenomenon. In the earlier Harappan period, at the beginning of the third millennium, we have the first evidence for structured trade between the Indus region and, in this case, Central Asia, in the form of small seals that they were, of course, not the items, the very subject of trade, but they testify to the presence of bureaucratically, administratively regulated trade between the two regions. Of course, the central and the pivotal region for discussing Indus external trade is Mesopotamia, the Near East. And we have a first phase during the so-called early dynastic period, and the second phase, very important phase during the Akkadian time, the Sargonic period, and the last phase during the Urtri period, just to give you a very broad idea of the chronological and cultural events that happened during this time. Even if the mention of Melucca, the first mention of the Indus civilization in the cuneiform text is in a text by Sargon of Akkad, around at the end of the 21st century. We have archaeological evidence for earlier contacts between the two regions. In the royal cemetery of Ur, there are several materials that are evidently of Indus origin, in conceptually or physically. For example, we have these two seals made from the columella of Turbinella Pirum. We know there's no geochemical analysis, but we know that the only shell with the columella thick enough to make those seals was Turbinella pyrum. Other were much thinner. And they belong to more or less 2500 BC. So at the very beginning, somehow, in a very early stage of the Indus phenomenon, of the Indus civilization in terms of the so-called integration era. But of course, the most spectacular objects in this phase were the beautiful carnelian ornaments in terms of the so-called bleach beads and the long and very long carnelian beads. The interesting fact, and for this we have to give credit to Markenauer, together with beads that are evidently of Indus style, of typical Indus style, we also have beads made in carnelian from Gujarat, made using Indus shaping and drilling techniques, but they were shaped in a local style. We have in Mesopotamian grave of AD3 period, we have many hexagonal faceted beads, usually in gold or lapis lazuli. And this is an imitation in carnelian from Gujarat, made using Indus typical drilling techniques using Ernestite constrictor cylindrical drill. So the interpretation of Markenauer, to which we agree, is that Indus craftspeople, Indus bead makers, moved to Mesopotamia, and they put their skills and raw materials and exotic raw materials at the service of the local elites. And at the moment, this paper is 2008, and it was the first proposal for this moving of people instead of just moving objects, of trading objects. And we will see in the presentation this is a founding principle of the Indus external trade. So, do we have any other evidence for Indus or Indus-related individuals in Mesopotamia? Yes, we do. First, in the still AD3 period, we have this, and Akkadian period in this case, we have evidence on seals, hybrid seals with Harappan iconographies and shape and cuneiform inscription of individuals with, on the top, Sumerian names, while in the center and the bottom, we have evidence for the local transcription of names that were neither Sumerian nor Akkadian, most likely the local transcription of Harappan names. So we have evidence for this. And this is not from Mesopotamia, this is from Western Iran. But just to show you that this is not isolated case, and this is not due to the alleged very advanced administrative and economic system of Mesopotamia. So we have seals with Indus iconographies and names in local Scripton languages. This is linear Elamite, also in Western Iran, for example. And we also have evidence in Mesopotamia of puppets, toys of Indus style, but made according to the geochemical analysis in local clay. And we have similar evidence, it's not in the presentation, but I can tell. Also in Oman, in the interior Oman, at the site of Salut, we have toys of Indus style. So there is evidence for the presence of individuals linked with the Indus Valley, with Melucca, also in the cuneiform text. There are individuals named Melucca, which is a little bit strange because they had father and mother with Sumerian names, and they give their sons Sumerian names. So it's not that the fact that they name Melucca is not direct evidence to the fact they were native to the Indus Valley. And there was for a long time also this narrative about a possible Indus enclave in the region of Lagash, the so-called village of Melucca, but recently Piotr Steinkeller made a strong point about the fact that this village of Melucca is to be instead translated as the village of Mr. Melucca. And this is something that is not unique in southern Mesopotamia. We don't know the reason why this person was given the name of Melucca. We already saw that this is not an isolated case. And in any case, there are texts describing the economic activities of this village, and there is nothing special. It was an agricultural settlement with no evidence for let's say, long distance intercultural exchanges. But there are also this seal of interpreter, translator of Melucca called Shuilisho. That was an Akkadian name. And also in this case, we have to probably rule out his possible origin from the Indus Valley. He was most likely a native person, an Akkadian individual that was employed by the royal court. He was accustomed to probably the language and the culture of the Indus civilization, and it was employed as an interpreter. But there are also individuals that were defined like people from Melucca. This Nanasa and Samara were employed in function of their expertise as shepherds of wild goats, possibly the marker goat that was apparently used in sacrifice and rituals in southern Mesopotamia. So we have evidence from the cuneiform text of individuals employed from the Indus Valley because of their technical skills. And very briefly, so we have a list of names from seals and tablets that were apparently local translation of Harappan names. We tried to link them to known language tradition, linguistic tradition, but we failed. And the reason why we failed is probably because this was a transcription in the local writing system of. And I just want to remind you that Emperor Chandragupta in ancient Greek was called Sandrokotos. So that was probably the closest transcription they had. So it's very difficult when you have transcription in foreign languages and foreign script of exotic names to go back to the linguistic tradition it belonged to. So let's hope that this small data set will increase, and maybe in the future we will be able to say something more precise about this interesting phenomenon. So was this phenomenon of the presence of Indus or Indus-related individuals exclusive to Mesopotamia? No. We have evidence for something similar, even if, of course, not supported by text, also in all other regions linked with Indus external trade, starting from Central Asia. This is the so-called BMAC, or Oxus civilization. And I had the privilege to study some objects from the site of Gunur Tepe and compare them with objects in the Indus Valley and in Altin Tepe. As we already saw, the links between the Indus Valley and Central Asia dated back to the early Harappan phase, but the peak of their exchanges was in a slightly later phase during, let's say, Harappa 3C period at the end of the third, beginning of the second millennium, which was the peak of the so-called Oxus civilization. Unfortunately, most of the objects testifying to these exchanges were from plundered graves. They were retrieved from the antiquity market, so their discovery contact was lost, but they are still quite informative. We also have objects from excavations. And what is, in my opinion, very interesting about the links between the Indus civilization and Central Asia in this period was the phenomenon of this human and animal statues, which most likely testify to the existence not of exchanges between the region, because in most of this region, these objects were locally made. We also have evidence at Gunur Tepe, for example, for a human statue in the same pose of the famous priest king that was in the process of making. So they probably testify to the existence of an interaction sphere of shared rituals, beliefs between Sindh, Baluchistan, Eastern Iran, because we have similar objects also in Eastern Iran, and Central Asia at the end of the third, beginning of the second millennium. So we are dealing with complex phenomena of not just exchange of finished objects, but mainly cultural interaction. You can see here how the pose and the decoration of the famous priest king matches perfectly also with these individuals represented on silver vessel from Bactria, which is northern Afghanistan, sorry. I was invited by the late Victor Sarianidi to study the ivory objects, the object of ivory of Asian elephant found at the site of Gunur Tepe. And the first thing that got me when I was there is that none of those objects, or the greatest majority of those objects, had nothing to do in terms of material classes of art style with the Indus civilization. So the first question that I asked myself was, if the source of Asian elephant ivory was only the Indus Valley at the time. This is a very complex topic that involves archaeozoology, cuneiform texts. So you have to believe me, yes. At the time, the only source of ivory for Central Asia was the Indus Valley. So I tried to understand basically who made these objects. We have objects related with personal care, like this beautiful cosmetic spade. You can see from the mosaics in the tombs of Gunur Tepe that this is from an artistic perspective, art style perspective, is typically local. There's nothing similar in the Indus sites. We have game boards for the famous game of the 20 squares. We have something similar, of course, also in the Indus Valley. We have in Iran, in Mesopotamia. Games and game boards at the time were widespread, of course, elite technology, elite productions. And those from Gunur Tepe were all made in ivory. And interestingly, they were made from the recut of ivory pieces, to indicate that ivory, elephant ivory, was a very exotic, very prized, very precious materials, because it was exploited until the very possible end of its life. We have not only game boards, we have stick dice, we have gaming pieces, other objects like handle of daggers, solid snake, that were all typical of the local art style and material culture. So, as I said, ivory was prized as a very, very exotic and important material. We have evidence from the archaeological record of the historical period for the presence in Central Asia of ivory carvers that moved from northern India to Central Asia to work for the local elites. And we also have very interesting literary sources mentioning ivory carvers moving from northern India to Bactria to again propose themselves and their skills to the local kings and the local elites. So what I propose eventually is that also in the Indus period, probably some ivory carvers from the Indus Valley, they moved to Central Asia and they offer their skills and exotic raw materials to the local elites. And they employed them for the production of objects in local art style and the local type. I excluded the possibility that they were local craftspeople, for example, with expertise in the carving of hardwood or bone, animal bones, because these skills required to work ivory, elephant ivory, were quite different from those. So we can rule out this possibility, and instead propose the presence of itinerant ivory carvers from the Indus Valley active in Central Asia. So let's move to another region. Let's move to Eastern Arabia, which is more in the cuneiform text, the land of Magan, and current present day Sultanate of Oman, north of the island of Mazira, and United Arab Emirates. The period that is contemporaneous with the Indus civilization is the so-called Umayyad period. And for this period, we have an enormous amount of Indus imported and Indus-related objects in the so-called Umayyad sites. We have seals, we will see, we have ornaments, we have ivory combs and ivory objects. You can see here seals. Some of them maybe were locally made. Some are hybrid production, half local and half Indus. These seals on the top left is very interesting from the site of Salut ST1 in the interior of Oman, not along the coast. It was a perfect Indus standard seals carved with Indus techniques and with an inscription that, according to Ascoparpola, is consistent with the inscription found in the Indus Valley in terms of sign sequence, but it was made in a local chloride. So in the same type of stone of chloride that was used locally to make, for example, the very famous softstone vessel of the Umayyad culture. At the same site, we also have a local Umayyad jar stamped before its firing with a seal or a tablet with two Indian bison in combat and Indus signs. So we have an individual that, sorry, with an Indus seal that stamped this jar locally before it was fired. And one of the characteristics of this region of Indus materials in Eastern Arabia is the presence of a high number of pottery containers of Indus type, which is something unique. Not a single Indus sherd that I'm aware of Indus type was found in Mesopotamia, for example. Possibly a few in Central Asia, one or two in Eastern Iran. In Oman, in the UAE, blacksmith jars are a marker, chronological marker for Umayyad site. There are very many, and we have other types like painted jars, dish on stand, pointed base goblets, perforated jars, cooking pots. So all range of the most characteristic Indus pottery types is found in the region in great quantity. And this is something anomalous, probably linked with the fact that the region was, of course, Eastern Arabia is an arid region, and it didn't have probably food production that was like that of Mesopotamia or Iran, that was very big and differentiated. So probably Indus trade with the region involved a big quantity also of food commodities. What is interesting to stress is that early research by Sophie Méry, mainly, discovered that a consistent quantity of this Indus-style container was made using local clay. So the first hypothesis was that the local communities imitated some specific vessel, mainly perforated jars and dish on stand, because they adopted new culinary habits after contact with Indus merchants along the coast. And there was also a huge number of blacksmith jars fragment in the interior, and that was interpreted with the local reuse of blacksmith jars by the local communities. Instead, always at the same site of Salut ST1 in the interior, together with Mark Neuer and Sophie Méry, we discovered a local production of Indus cooking pots, Indus blacksmith jars using local clay. So at the same site, we have, and this was also confirmed by neutron activation analysis, At the same site, we have Indus seals made locally, Indus tablet, inscribed tablets used locally. We have Indus toys, different types of Indus toys. So, and containers, complex pottery containers, ceramic containers made locally, employing complex Indus techniques and local raw materials. So our interpretation, our proposal at the moment is that some Indus, small Indus groups of individuals, including merchant and craft people, were settled in the region most likely to negotiate access to copper, which was the most important production of the region, negotiating access, the procurement of copper ingots with the socioeconomic entities, local socioeconomic entities that manage its extraction and first processing. So another very interesting feature of Indus external trade in Eastern Arabia is the presence in the Umanar communal tombs of these containers called Indus bottles, or the carinated jars with high neck, decorated with Indus motifs. And when they were found, they were originally interpreted as an original, imitation of local production. But neutron activation analysis by Jim Blackman, they demonstrated they were produced in Sindh, the Mohenjo-Daro area. So, and there is not a single, as far as I know, as far as the communities knows for the moment, pottery container of this type in Sindh or in the entire Indus Valley. So from being the best candidate for a local production, now they have to be interpreted as a production, as a pottery type proactively designed and manufactured to be exported in a foreign market. So this is something that is very unique and is very complex. It's a very modern approach to foreign external trade. So to understand the needs and the styles of a foreign regions, produce something that is to be specifically exported to that region. And this is the last discoveries that we made in Oman at the site of Dahua of an object linked with Indus external trade in a communal tomb accommodating about 300 individuals. Our colleague Kimberly Williams from Temple University found a collection of silver jewelry. Among them, the vast majority was linked with South Mesopotamia production. But one of them, this beautiful silver ring, has on the bezel the card of an Indian bison, where we know there is a general agreement that it was the symbol of Indus merchants involved in external trade. So to better understand this beautiful object, we asked our colleagues Randall Law to analyze the source of the silver, and it turned out that the object was made using silver from Anatolia in Turkey, which was the preferential silver source for silver objects made in southern Mesopotamia at the time. So most likely the objects were made in southern Mesopotamia, used for an individual link with Indus external trade using silver from Anatolia, and at some point they ended up in Eastern Oman, in Eastern Arabia. Of course, we cannot say 100% that the person who commissioned these objects was buried at some point in Oman. According to Randall, the composition of these objects is very consistent. So apparently they were made in a single fusion, in a single casting. But of course, we cannot say that they were buried together with their owner. Still, that would be not, a hazard, because there is evidence in several tombs of the Umanar period of individuals that have an isotopic signature consistent with the Indus Valley. So we cannot say that, but we should not be surprised that the future research will confirm this possibility. So again, we have increasing evidence for individuals from the Indus Valley or linked with Indus external trader were active in different regions of Western and Central Asia in different ways. And this is the most interesting perspective. They were not copying the same marketing strategy or production strategy. They were adapting to the different regions in order to, maximize their probably profits. So Dilmun is another of the regions mentioned together with Magan and Melucca in the Akkadian text. Dilmun is present-day Bahrain mainly, with some areas of eastern Saudi Arabia and the island of Melucca in Kuwait. We have evidence for a new type of seals that is called the Gulf seals. I don't really agree with this definition because we have the same type of seals also in southern Mesopotamia, in Iran, and also in Central Asia. They were all introduced around 2200 BC. They were evidently a variant of the standard square Indus seals. They all have an inscription in Indus sign that sometimes is statistically not consistent with the inscription within the Indus Valley and a short-horned bull or Indian bison. Our colleague Stefan Laursen made a morphometric analysis of these seals, and they result in 4 groups with a very strong regional consistency. So apparently they were made locally. They were not made in the Indus Valley to be used around, to be used outside the Indus Valley, but they were made in the different regions to be used locally. And this was also confirmed by, I don't know, I don't have the slide here, but it was confirmed by analysis of the carving techniques by our colleagues and friends, Kanori Uzugi, who studied some of these objects, some of these seals found in Bahrain. So they were made locally. And in Dilmun, at the site in Bahrain, at the site of Kalat al-Bahrain, together with these seals, archaeologists also found wakes of Indus type, and they were found near the city gates. So they were not employed, or they were not mainly used in trade, but like in Harappa, where they were also found near the city gates, they were mainly or also used in taxation and duties to control the entrance and exit of goods and people in and out of the city. Something interesting, and I'm happy that Bishji is here today because I would like to know his opinion, and also Prabhakar. There is this evidence in Dolavira of a tumulus that is very similar in shape and size to the famous radial burial mounds of Bahrain. There are, of course, solid evidence for trade exchanges between the two regions, that these will be unique evidence, very complex to interpret, but first we have to confirm the typological matching. Of course, these tumuli are very different from the typical Indus graves, like those ones from Rakhigarhi, or those from Harappa, so we have to think about them a little bit more in depth. Something interesting about Dilmun and Bahrain and Arabia is also that apparently trade with the Indus Valley continues also into the late Harappan period. We have here evidence of late Sorat and probably also some Jukar face pottery. What is interesting, and of course we have in Lothal the famous Dilmun seal, which is an evolution, later evolution, local evolution of those so-called Gulf seals found in Bahrain at the same time of the Harappan culture. These are a little bit later into the later Harappan phase. So what is interesting and unique of the interaction between these two regions is that apparently what the Indus civilization brought to Dilmun is not objects is not, or at least not mainly objects, not mainly trade activities, but they provided them with their expertise and technology, administrative technology, in terms of seals and weights. And this is something, again, very, very complex, very interesting, and quite unique. So to conclude, I would like to discuss a few hybrid seals that have been found in Iran. There are many Indus and Indus-related sites in the different regions of Iran, mainly, of course, carnelian beads, but I'm trying to leave them out of my thinking at the moment, because we know from Mesopotamia, from the Arabian Peninsula, that unless you have the opportunity to really perform geochemical analysis or study the production techniques, it's very difficult to understand whether they are of real Indus origin, if they were made locally by Indus craft people. So I really hope that some Iranian colleagues or some other colleagues will be allowed soon to study them in more detail, so we can add them into this complex picture that is emerging about Indus external trade. These seals are kind of interesting because they show hybrid features. They are all cylinder seals, which is not the typical seal type of the Indus Valley. They were made, at least this one from Susa was made in fire steatite, which is distinctive technology of Indus seal making. And it always made me laughing because that poor short-horned bull has the body very oddly elongated. So it looked quite strange, and I try to understand the reason why, because Indus seal makers, they were only very, very skilled and precise. And we made some calculation, and apparently the possible reason for this oddly elongated body is that the seal maker was probably trained in carving stamp seals. So he carved the cylinder as it was a stamp, and he or she didn't consider the perspective distortion of rolling eventually the cylinder onto clay. So the body of the animal resulted oddly elongated. So we can possibly consider the possibility that this was made originally by an Indus seal maker active in Western Iran, also because of the use of high fire steatite. This instead, if it's a perfectly local style seals found at Jalalabad in central Iran, but it had a short inscription of Indus signs to a typically local inscription, local iconography. And this last one is possibly the most interesting somehow, because it was found during excavation at the site of Konar Sandal South in the Jiraf province. And it probably features the translation into a local art and sphagistic style of a typical Indus iconography that was originally arranged in a round shape. And in this case, it was translated in a linear way. So we have evidence to conclude in the different regions of different approaches, maximizing probably the results of the investments of the Indus commercial and productive entities involved in external trade. And we have evidence, solid evidence, not only for the exchange of objects, but also for the presence in the different regions of individuals from the Indus Valley or linked to the Indus external trade. So if we try to interpret this phenomenon in an historical and also theoretical perspective, we enter into the concept of globalization and localization, which are not synonymous, they are not the same meaning, they are kind of antithetics. There is this kind of interpretation is growing up in the recent, you have here an example of very recent publication about this phenomenon, how they have to be theoretically interpreted, to be projected. Of course, globalization is a modern concept, but if we isolate some founding features, we can try to apply also to historical and protohistorical phenomena. So what's the difference between globalization and localization? Globalization is basically, in very, very simple words, the attempt of selling the same objects on service on a global scale. Localization, instead, is the attempt of understanding and benefiting from local particularities of the different markets to better penetrate a foreign market. And while globalization leads to extreme standardization of the production, localization leads to extreme differentiation and adaptation of the different production to the local market. So in my opinion, and of course there is a lot of work to do more, but at present, my opinion is that the Indus external trade is a supra-regional marketing strategy with a localizing vision, not globalizing, because we have evidence, solid evidence for the attempt of studying, understanding, penetrating the different markets in the different regions of Central Asia, not just by exchanging objects, but also by moving people, merchant craftspeople, and adapt their production to the local taste, the local tradition. So this is one, of course, example, the most probably successful example of localization, just to make you a little bit more practical example. So to summarize, this is the last slide. We have evidence in all regions interested by industry external trade of different models, different approaches, always involving not only the exchange of objects, but also the active presence of individuals or small groups of individuals linked with the Indus Valley or native of the Indus region. So thank you very much. Again, it was a real privilege for me to be here and to share my thoughts with you. Of course, nothing of this would have been possible without all the scholars and colleagues who worked before me. I'm written, as is usually said, tap on the shoulder of giants. And also thanks also to my colleagues and friends who collaborated with me in the different regions and in the different projects. And thank you again for Prabhakar for inviting me.
Do you have any question to Dr. Dennis?
No.
Okay.
But I only thank you and congratulate him for giving a very illustrative, very exhaustive lecture on the interaction of globalization of Indian industry.
Thank you, sir. And a special message to all the participants. If we can take 2 or 3 messages. If anybody wants to give their message, please raise your hand. So we can
Yeah,
2 or 3 messages.
I would like to talk to Randall Law if he's still there.
I don't think so, sir. He's not here.
Okay.
Ji.
So give me his email address.
Ji. I think he's left.
Okay. Actually, I wanted to thank him.
Ji.
But give me his email address.
Okay, sir. Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
It's wonderful. We thank you very much for organizing this thing on the occasion of the discovery of the Harappan civilization.
Most welcome, sir. But on this occasion, what I want to convey is that the kind of discoveries, the kind of understandings what we have about the Harappan civilization, and in particular the kind of remarkable discoveries made at Dholavira, I think we should think of something to reach to the public. How the public is going to remember all these things, how it actually can be understood in a more simplistic manner. It's okay that we are all discussing in a scholarly world. We do publish articles, but ultimately what the public is understanding. I think some ground level work is necessary, maybe simplifying heritage in such a manner that they can participate, they can handle the ancient objects, they can understand them. And I think in this regard, Dholavira is the ideal place. I mean, what I have thought, I mean, I have visualized with some of my colleagues is that Dholavira is one such place where we can kind of set up a research center or a kind of workshop. Research center can come workshop where people can come, stay there, participate. They can manufacture ceramics, they can manufacture terracotta figurines, they can participate in the actual heritage understanding. I think it is still in an embryonic stage, but we need your blessing, sir. I mean, so that in Dholavira we can do something so that we can reach to the public in a more successful manner. What I think is that there is a delinking between heritage and the common public, but we should reach out to the public in a more effective manner.
Sure. Hello.
Ji,
Hello.
sir. Ji.
If embryo is there, the child is likely to give to take place. Gone?
Ji. Sir, I could not hear you properly.
If you are hello.
Ji.
If you are conceiving,
Ji.
then you will give birth to the child also.
That's the ultimate aim, sir. But yeah, once I mean, we need to kind of discuss and how we can take this forward so that we can involve a bigger group. We can make it more effectively so that students from different universities, they can come there, they can stay there, they can experience and also participate in the actual heritage protection.
Yeah, hello. Am I audible, sir?
Very wonderful.
Yeah, who is this?
Hello.
Hello, yeah, I'm Dr. Lakshmi Roy, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very nice and informative session, sir. Like quite enriching one, quite descriptive one, which will help us to understand about the Harappan civilization in a great deal. Well, I want that, sir. Can we extend this session, like, in a further upcoming days so that other students or the institutions can also benefit? Can we have, further enhancement of this program? Is there any possibility?
No, at present we have not planned in such a manner because we just organized in within 1 week. So we could not think of a bigger event. I mean, actually, it deserves a 2-day or 3-day international conference sort of thing, but we could not plan because of a very short notice. Anyways, but it's a nice suggestion, and we can think of organizing something maybe in 2026. I mean, Professor Ajit was suggesting when Charles Mason visited Harappa for the first time, maybe that can be one occasion. Let's see. I mean, at present, we don't have any such plans. I would like to request some of the younger colleagues from ASI. Is there anyone from ASI?
Satrupa, I'm here, sir.
Yes.
Is there anyone from ASI? Please raise your hand.
Sir, I'm unable to raise hand. I'm not understanding from where to do that.
Who is this?
Sir, Satrupa.
Acha, okay. Can you just leave us a very short message?
Yes, sir. Sir, thank you for inviting us to this lecture. And this was there was an immense knowledge that was expounded today. And so basically, in these many years of extensive excavation and research, we have formed a clear picture of this sprawling civilization. But then, sir, as Professor Paolo Biaggi said, that there is a lot still to be done, because the number of times certain sites get excavated, there are very new things that come up. There is new evidence, there are new ideas behind it. So, sir, I guess there are a lot of works more to be done yet. So, sir, I would like to take this opportunity to say that this anniversary is a tribute to the remarkable achievement of the Harappans that showcases a highly advanced technology of ancient times. In a similar way, This is also a reminder to the importance of meticulous fieldwork and research that aided in understanding this prosperous civilization. So, sir, as we reflect on this Harappan legacy and honor the spirit of discovery of this huge civilization, we recognize the lessons that the Harappans have to offer about innovation, community, and resilience. So, sir, that is how I would like to put forth my points. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shatrupa.
Thank you,
I
sir.
would like to request Professor Rajan. Professor Rajan, are you there? Professor Rajan? Yeah. Professor Rajan?
Yeah, I could hear you.
Yeah. Can you leave us a very short message, sir?
Yeah, thank you very much. At the outset, I'd like to thank you for organizing such a wonderful lecture. And in view of that, we are also organizing a international seminar in the month of January to celebrate this discovery. And we all invite these wonderful scholars to come over to Chennai and there to exchange their views. And in the recent evidences that is coming up in Tamil Nadu and other parts of South India, that the graffiti marks which we have collected about more than 13,000 parts outs we have already documented. That is in the process of comparing with other parts of India. I do hope that during the seminar we can able to present that one to the scholarly world. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to express my view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the very last message I would like to request, I know this person. Priyank, are you there?
I'm here, sir. I'm here. I was not able to unmute, sir. Priyank this side, sir.
Anchalo, I mean, you please leave us a short message. Switch on your video. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for giving me this opportunity. And it was really insightful to listen to Ajit sir and other speakers also, Nayanjot ma'am, Kori Sattar sir. And it was really, really illustrative. I just had a small question, sir, if I may ask, from Ajit sir or Bishji is also there, if you permit me.
No, it's getting late. You leave your message. I mean,
okay, sir. Okay.
What is your impression? I mean, because you are going to be the future, right? One among the future generation in ASI. Yeah, you please leave your message. What do you feel?
So I've already shared the question, sir, with you. You may afterward you may answer that to me, sir. And thank you so much, sir, for organizing this. And this has been really remarkable. 100 years, but we have so much to do because, as you just said yourself, also, sir, that there is so much more to understand and to interpret. Because we have just at the beginning of the interpretation and understanding of our Harappan civilization and its correlation with all the other Bronze Age civilization in Middle East or in BMAC or even Oxus. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I think there are so many guests and so many people. It's very difficult to accommodate. It's getting very late, and we have some more programs tomorrow also. Anyway, I thank all my students, colleagues, everybody who has participated, and it's a nice, wonderful journey of 100 years. And I think there are many unsung heroes. I know there are stalwarts. I mean, if we want to take names, it won't end. The day is not enough. There are so many people who have really contributed for the furtherment of knowledge related to Harappan civilization. And I really salute on behalf of IIT Gandhinagar and also on behalf of Archaeological Survey of India, because I was part of Archaeological Survey of India. I really salute each and everybody, starting from the first DG of ASI in post-independence era, from NP Chakravarti to the present DG, Sri Y.S. Ravasji, who have done enormous work. I mean, many people have done in their own individual capacities from ASI, and from the university side, I mean, amazing work. I mean, MS University, Deccan College, BHU, they have done some amazing work under several stalwarts. One of the stalwart is here with us. And I mean, again, taking in each individual name, it will be a very big, I mean, it will take a lot of time. And apart from that, I mean, we have several foreign institutions, universities who have worked in India and Pakistan, Oman, Central Asia, who have really helped us in understanding the larger picture of Harappan civilization. I think that is the most important aspect. Even though we understand the subcontinent aspect, but if we look beyond, that is something which, I mean, we may not get an opportunity, or we don't have that kind of interaction with those countries. But the expeditions by several foreign institutions and scholars like Dr. Fennes, Dr. Denise, and several other people who are working in Oman, Magan area and Bahrain, they have really helped us a lot. And ultimately, I would like to really commend the work of Professor Mark Kanevar and his entire student team, who have really contributed enormously. I mean, not only Professor Mark, I have to name Professor Richard Meadow, George F. Dales, Dr. Rita Wright, and I mean, each and every mission. I mean, there is a long list of German mission, French mission. Everyone, they have really contributed, and we have really understood a great deal, and the work is still continuing. It is not that it has stopped. It is still continuing, and we are getting more and more information. And in the context of India, Professor Cameron Petrie and his team and his projects, they are providing new insights, and several other teams. I mean, if I have left anyone, I am really sorry. I apologize for that. But a whole galaxy of archaeologists who have toiled in the field, toiled in the lab, they have given us new perspectives, and I hope this will continue, and this will enrich the younger generation. They will come up with more energy, and they will do further research. And thank you, everyone. Thank you, sir, my Guruji, Bishji sir. I'm really thank you to you to introducing me to Harappan archaeology. And whatever I mean, speaking a very little, I mean, I feel I know only 0.001% of Harappan archaeology. It is because of you, because of your training and my association with Dolavira, and I thank you very much for that. And I thank again Professor Ajit and Dr. Denise. Thank you.